I should have never gone back to that place. People in town still whisper about it, the way they whisper about a grave you're not supposed to walk over. To most, it's just a ruin now, a skeleton of bricks and broken windows. But to me, it was never just a building. My grandfather worked there, long before I was born. He died inside those walls. I grew up hearing fragments of the story, how he was a night orderly in St. Mercy Hospital, how he stayed late after shifts, how he told my grandmother strange things before he passed away. Whispers of patients who had been discharged but still roamed the halls. Of doors that opened into rooms no one could find again. Of screams in wings that had been locked for years. But when I was younger, my grandmother would shut him up, pressing her fingers to his lips whenever he drifted into those memories. Not in front of the children, she'd hiss. He'd just nod, eyes pale and far away, like the hospital had never really let him leave. When I turned 24, she finally told me the truth. Or at least, enough of it to make me feel the weight of his death. My grandfather hadn't died of illness or accident. He'd been found hanging in one of the unused wings, his body swaying from an old rusted pipe in the children's ward. No one could explain why he was even there, because the wing had been sealed off for years. That was when the town finally shut St. Mercy down. Patients were relocated, staff dismissed, and the building was left to rot. My family never spoke of it again. But silence never buries anything completely. When I first stood before the gates of the abandoned hospital, nearly 30 years after its closure, I felt the weight of 100 stairs pressing down on me. The building loomed against the darkening sky, its windows black and hollow, like eye sockets picked clean. Vines curled up its walls, strangling the bricks. Rust streaked down from the gutters like dried blood. The air smelled wrong, stale, metallic, and faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. It was the kind of smell that reminded you of funeral homes. I told myself I came here because I needed answers. Because I had spent too long imagining what had happened to my grandfather that night. But in truth, I think the hospital called me back. A pull, like a hand reaching from the dark, tugging at the string of blood that bound me to it. I pushed the gates open, their hinges screaming like a warning. The courtyard was littered with weeds, broken glass, and the carcass of an old wheelchair. Its single wheel squeaked as the wind pushed it in slow circles. My flashlight beam cut across the cracked pavement. Every shadow seemed too sharp, too heavy. I hadn't even stepped inside yet, and already the silence pressed against my ears, thick and suffocating. I tried to laugh it off. "It's just a building," I whispered. My voice didn't carry far. It was swallowed whole, like the walls were drinking in sound. But when I stepped onto the hospital's front steps, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. No caller ID. No number at all. Just a blank screen. I didn't answer. I should have left right then. But I pressed on. Inside, the air was colder. My breath fogged faintly in the beam of my flashlight. The entrance hall stretched wide, littered with fallen ceiling tiles and discarded medical charts. A reception desk sat at the far end, papers yellowed and curling across its surface. Behind it, a long dark hallway gaped open. The first thing I noticed was the graffiti. Black spray-painted words scrawled across the peeling wallpaper. "Don't listen to them. Get out before nightfall. The children are hungry." Each phrase jagged, desperate. I told myself it was just kids. Urban explorers like me. But the way the paint dripped, long, uneven streaks down the walls, looked too much like blood. I flicked through one of the scattered charts. A patient record, name smudged by water damage. But one word remained clear: discharged. I kept walking. My footsteps echoed, too loud in the silence. The hallway seemed endless, doors on either side yawning open into rooms filled with shadows. My flashlight caught glimpses: overturned gurneys, shattered floor stands, beds with restraints still strapped across them. I should have been horrified. Instead, a strange familiarity tugged at me. Like I had walked these halls before. Like the hospital had been waiting for me. At the end of the corridor, I found the children's ward. The doors were sealed with heavy chains, the metal corroded and green with age. A sign dangled from one link, its letters faded but still legible. Restricted access. My chest tightened. This was it. This was where they found my grandfather. As I reached out to touch the chain, the air shifted. Cold swept over me in a sudden wave, sharp enough to sting my skin. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, and for a moment, I thought I saw something standing behind the glass of the door. A small silhouette. Thin. Childlike. Watching me. Then the light steadied, and the glass reflected only my own pale face. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. "No," I whispered. "You're just spooking yourself. It's just a shadow." But then I heard it. The faintest sound, carried through the hall. A child's giggle. High-pitched. Playful. And very, very wrong. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed inside St. Mercy. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to know more. Maybe because the sound of that giggle hooked into my ribs and pulled me deeper. Maybe because when I turned toward the exit, I found the door chained shut behind me, even though I had left it wide open when I entered. Either way, by the time the sun set and the hospital sank fully into darkness, I was already too far inside to turn back. And that's when the real haunting began. The first night inside St. Mercy felt endless. I told myself I'd just wait until morning, that the chains on the doors might look weaker in the light, that maybe I could find another way out. But the darkness pressed in like a weight. And the giggling, it didn't stop. It drifted through the halls, faint but constant. Sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind. Sometimes it sounded like one child, sometimes like many. The laughter didn't echo the way normal sound should, it crawled along the walls, slithering into the corners of the rooms, whispering just beneath the edge of hearing. I tried covering my ears, but I could still feel it. Like fingers tapping against my skull. The first room I explored had once been a nurse's station. The counters were cluttered with rusted syringes and cracked medicine bottles. My flashlight beam glinted off a broken mirror, and for half a second I thought I saw someone standing beside me. A tall figure in a nurse's uniform, face pale, lips twisted into something that wasn't a smile. When I turned, there was nothing but dust and shadows. But the mirror stayed fogged. Like someone had just breathed on it. I backed out quickly. I couldn't stop myself from circling back to the children's ward doors. The chains seemed thicker now, almost alive, glistening as though wet. My flashlight caught movement on the other side of the glass, fleeting shadows darting back and forth. Like children playing tag in the dark. Then, pressed against the glass, a small handprint appeared. I froze. My beam caught it perfectly. Too clear, too fresh. 5 small fingers splayed against the surface, as if a child inside was silently begging me to open the doors. And then another appeared beside it. And another. And another. Tiny handprints, smearing across the glass, crowding closer, overlapping until the door was nothing but a canvas of pale prints. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The laughter rose, sharper now, edges of cruelty slicing through the sound. Not the playful laughter of living children, something older, hungrier, wearing the sound of children like a mask. The pounding on the stairwell door had stopped. But silence in St. Mercy was never a gift, it was a trap. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. My flashlight beam swept the hall, catching on broken gurneys and shattered windows. The air was colder now, sharp enough to bite at my skin. Somewhere deeper in the hospital, I heard it, the sound of children humming. A soft, tuneless murmur, rising and falling. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't innocent. It was a lullaby warped into something cruel. I followed it. The humming drew me into the cafeteria. Long tables sat in rows, overturned trays scattered across the floor. The smell hit me first, coppery, rotten, like spoiled meat left too long in the heat. And then I saw them. The children were gathered here, crouched on the tables like carrion birds. Their heads twitched as they turned toward me, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They weren't laughing now. They were eating. Something lay across the center table. At first I thought it was a mannequin, limp, gray-skinned, dressed in tattered hospital scrubs. But as my light steadied, I saw the truth. It was a body. A man's body. The children tore at it with their hands, pulling strips of flesh and stuffing them into their mouths. My stomach lurched. I stumbled backward, clamping my hand over my mouth. One of them turned its head toward me, cheeks bulging, blood dripping down its chin. Its grin widened. And in a voice far too deep for its small frame, it whispered. "Hungry?" I bolted, but the hospital shifted again. The doors I had come through were gone. Hallways bent at impossible angles, pulling me deeper, always deeper. The humming followed me, turning into laughter, echoing inside my skull. I ducked into a side room and slammed the door behind me. My flashlight beam caught on walls covered in drawings. Crayon scribbles, hundreds of them, layered over peeling wallpaper. Stick figures holding hands. Smiling suns. Houses. But the deeper I looked, the darker they became. Figures hanging from ropes. Black shapes looming over children in beds. A hospital drawn over and over, its windows filled with faces screaming. And scrawled across the center wall in thick black crayon. The hospital feeds US. The hospital needs US. My skin crawled. Then I noticed the floor. Not drawings this time. Photos. Hundreds of old photographs, scattered across the tiles. Staff members in uniforms. Doctors. Nurses. Patients. Each photo had the eyes scratched out. I picked one up with shaking hands. A familiar face stared back at me, his smile wide, his arm around another orderly. His eyes had been gouged into empty pits, but I knew that face. My grandfather. I fled down the hallway, deeper into the hospital. My flashlight beam trembled as I ran. The building seemed to twist, corridors stretching too long, turns leading back to where I had started. It was like St. Mercy was shifting around me, folding me deeper into itself. I burst into another ward, rows of beds lined up, their frames rusted and skeletal. Restraints dangled from them, swaying gently even though there was no breeze. At the far end of the room, something sat on one of the beds. A child-sized figure, knees drawn to its chest. My light trembled as I raised it. Its skin was gray. Its eyes too wide, glinting wetly in the beam. Its mouth stretched into an impossible grin, teeth small and sharp like broken glass. The sound of giggling filled the room, but its lips never moved. The laughter was everywhere else, all around me, while the thing just stared. I blinked, and the bed was empty. My grandfather's face flashed in my mind. The way he used to stare past us during family dinners, silent, trembling, lost in memories of this place. The way he had begged my grandmother not to let him work nights, but had gone anyway. The way he had died in this very ward. A thought struck me cold. What if he hadn't hanged himself? What if something in this place had put the rope around his neck? I needed answers. I searched through drawers, file cabinets, anything left behind. Most of the papers were ruined, mold-eaten and faded. But in a locked filing cabinet, I found something intact, a stack of incident reports. They were dated from the months before the hospital shut down. Each one mentioned the same wing, the children's ward. Strange disturbances. Patients claiming to see things in the halls. Staff refusing night shifts. Children screaming at shadows in the corners of their rooms. One report chilled me more than the rest. A nurse described hearing children giggling in the middle of the night. She followed the sound into the restricted wing. And when she came back, she was bleeding from the ears, her hair turned white overnight, and she never spoke again. At the bottom of the page was a name I recognized. Signed by the reporting staff member, Orderly Daniel Mercer. My grandfather. The paper shook in my hands. He had been here. He had seen it. He had tried to document it. That was why he kept going back. Why he had stayed in the hospital late, even when it drove him to whispers and trembling silence. He wasn't mad. He was trying to understand it. And whatever he saw here followed him into death. The sound of wheels squeaking cut through my thoughts. Slow. Rhythmic. A wheelchair, rolling down the hall. I turned toward the sound. My flashlight caught it, an empty chair, moving on its own, rolling across the floor as though pushed by invisible hands. It came to a stop in the middle of the ward. And then it turned. Slowly. Facing me. I didn't wait. I bolted from the room, papers clutched tight against my chest. The hospital was awake now. Lights flickered in rooms I hadn't touched. Doors creaked open and slammed shut. The intercom crackled overhead, spilling faint whispers I couldn't make out. And always, the laughter. Sometimes I thought I heard my name in it. Sometimes I thought I heard my grandfather's. I ended up in the basement stairwell, the door groaning as I pushed it open. The air that rushed out was damp and suffocating, thick with the stench of mold and something sour, like spoiled meat. The steps descended into pitch black. My flashlight's beam only reached a few feet before the dark swallowed it whole. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to go down there. But another sound rose from below. Not laughter this time. Crying. A child's sobs, echoing up the stairwell. Weak. Helpless. It sounded so real. So human. I gripped the railing and started down. Step after step, the crying grew louder. It tugged at something deep inside me, the same way the laughter had. A hook in the ribs, pulling me where the hospital wanted me. Halfway down, my flashlight flickered. When it steadied, I saw something scrawled on the wall in what looked like crayon. We never left. At the bottom of the stairs, I found the basement hallway. Pipes lined the ceiling, dripping water into puddles on the floor. Doors branched off into storage rooms, most hanging from broken hinges. The crying came from the far end. I followed, each step echoing too loudly. My light shook as I raised it. The sobbing grew louder, clearer, until I reached the last door. It was slightly open. A soft glow spilled from the crack. With trembling hands, I pushed it wider. Inside was a small hospital room, cleaner than the others. A single bed sat in the center, sheets neatly made. And sitting on the bed was a little boy. He looked maybe 6 years old. Pale skin, dark hair. His face streaked with tears. When he lifted his head to look at me, my blood turned to ice. Because he had my grandfather's eyes. I found the stairwell and hurled myself upward, 2 steps at a time. Hands clawed at the railing just inches below me. My flashlight beam swung wildly, catching glimpses of gray faces, teeth flashing in twisted grins. At the top, I slammed the door shut and threw my weight against it. Tiny fists pounded from the other side, shaking the metal, rattling the hinges. Then, silence. I sank to the floor, trembling, my chest heaving. I pressed the file papers against me like they were some kind of shield. My grandfather's signature stared back from the yellowed page. He had known. He had seen them. He had tried to warn someone. And maybe, just maybe, they had claimed him for it. Because now, they wanted me. The boy didn't move. He just sat there on the hospital bed, staring at me with those pale gray eyes that I had only ever seen in old photographs of my grandfather. My throat went dry. Who are you?" I whispered. His lips trembled, and when he spoke, his voice was soft, too soft for the echoing concrete room. "They won't let me go." I stepped closer. My flashlight shook in my hand, the beam jittering across the boy's face. His skin looked wrong, too pale, almost translucent, like thin paper stretched over bone. And yet, there was something fragile about him. He looked more sorrowful than monstrous. "Who won't let you go?" I asked. The boy's eyes darted toward the corners of the room, the dark spaces the light didn't reach. "The others," he whispered. "The ones who never left." I followed his gaze, but there was nothing, only peeling paint and pipes dripping water. When I turned back, the boy was closer. I hadn't seen him move, but he was suddenly at the edge of the bed, his small hand reaching for me. "They're hungry," he said. "And they remember you." My chest tightened. "Remember me?" "No, you mean my grandfather." The boy's grin split across his face. It was wide, unnatural, stretching too far. "You carry his blood. That's enough." The light above flickered violently. The walls groaned. And then the laughter returned, louder than ever before, spilling from the hallway, pouring into the basement like water flooding a chamber. I stumbled back, my flashlight beam darting across the walls. The boy was gone. The bed was empty, the sheets neat as if no one had ever sat there. But the sobbing continued. Only now it wasn't one voice. It was dozens. Children crying, wailing, begging, their voices overlapping into a chorus of misery. I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me. The basement corridor stretched endlessly, the sound of crying chasing me. My flashlight flickered out completely, leaving me in suffocating blackness. I fumbled with the switch, slapping the casing, until suddenly it blazed back to life. And I wasn't alone. Children stood all along the hallway, lining the walls. Dozens of them, pale and gray, their eyes wide and wet, their lips curling into identical too-wide smiles. Some clutched broken dolls, others dragged 4 poles, their wheels squealing on the floor. Every single one of them had eyes that glowed faintly in the beam of my light. I froze. My breath came ragged, shallow. Then, in perfect unison, they all tilted their heads toward me. The hallway erupted with laughter. High-pitched. Shrieking. Deafening. The children lunged. I ran. My footsteps pounded against the wet floor as I tore down the corridor, the sound of bare feet slapping against concrete chasing me. I didn't look back, I didn't dare, but I could feel them, their cold presence flooding closer, brushing at my back. The laughter rose again, all around me. The children's voices overlapping, mocking. "Just like him," they whispered. "He fed us too. He stayed too long." The air thickened, pressing down on me like a hand around my throat. I dropped the photo and ran. I didn't know where I was going anymore. The hospital decided that for me. And it led me straight into the operating theater. The room was vast, circular, with rows of observation seats climbing upward like an arena. Rusted surgical tools lay scattered across the floor. An operating table sat in the center, its restraints torn but still stained dark. The lights above flickered, and for the first time since entering St. Mercy, I wasn't alone. Figures filled the observation seats. Doctors in blood-stained coats. Nurses with hollow eyes. Patients in gowns, their faces slack and gray. All watching silently as I stood in the center. And then, one by one, the children filed in. Crawling down the aisles, perching on the seats, their grins stretched wide. The humming began again. Low. Rhythmic. And the table in the center creaked. Its restraints tightened on their own. Something wanted me to lie down. Something wanted to feed. I screamed and fled, shoving through a side door. The humming turned to shrieks, furious, echoing through the theater. The children's laughter chased me down the hall. And I realized then. The hospital wasn't haunted. The hospital was alive. And it was hungry. I don't remember choosing the hallway I ran into, but somehow, St. Mercy guided me exactly where it wanted me. The children's laughter faded into whispers. My flashlight dimmed, then flickered back to life, revealing a door at the end of the corridor. The sign above it read, Staff Records, Archive. I pushed it open. Inside, rows of filing cabinets stretched into the shadows. Papers lay in heaps across the floor, patient charts curling with mold. The air was thick with dust. But at the center of the room stood a single chair. And sitting in it was a man. My breath caught in my chest. He was slumped forward, a rope around his neck, the end of it tied to a rusted pipe above. His body hung just inches above the floor. My flashlight trembled as I raised it higher. His face was pale, swollen. His eyes clouded. But even through death, I recognized him. My grandfather. No, I whispered. No, no, no. His head jerked up. Clouded eyes fixed on me. His lips twitched, cracked and gray. And in a voice that rattled like broken glass, he spoke. You shouldn't have come here. I stumbled backward, my chest heaving. You're dead. You've been dead for 30 years. The body swayed slightly, the rope creaking. I tried to warn them. They wouldn't listen. The hospital doesn't let us leave. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. What do they want? His mouth opened wide, too wide, jaw cracking. His voice deepened, echoing through the archive. They want to be remembered. They want to be fed. And now, they want you. The rope snapped. His body collapsed to the floor, but it didn't stop moving. Hands clawed at the ground, dragging his ruined frame toward me. His face twisted into a grotesque grin, the same grin the children wore. I screamed and ran, bolting from the archive, his rasping laughter chasing me down the hall. I stumbled back toward the hallway, but the doors slammed shut behind me. The children closed in, their grins wide, their hands reaching. I swung my flashlight wildly, the beam slicing through their faces, and for a split second, I saw something behind them. A door. Not a hospital door. Something older. Wooden, heavy, carved with strange symbols that pulsed faintly with light. The children hissed when my beam touched it. Their smiles faltered. It was the only chance I had. I pushed through them, their cold hands clawing at my arms, tearing at my clothes. Their laughter turned to shrieks, furious, hungry. But I reached the door and threw it open. On the other side was silence. A long, endless corridor, lined with doors on either side. Each one was different, some wood, some metal, some barred like cells. And from behind each door, faint sounds leaked. Whispers. Cries. Laughter. I realized, with a sinking horror, that this wasn't just St. Mercy. This was something bigger. A place where every haunted building, every cursed place, every restless spirit connected. A labyrinth of the forgotten and the damned. And now, I was inside it. Behind me, the children's laughter rose again. The hospital's heartbeat thundered in the distance. The door began to close on its own. I had a choice. Step deeper into the labyrinth, or let St. Mercy take me. I took one last look back at the hospital that had killed my grandfather. Its halls writhed in darkness, its walls bleeding, its children screaming. And then the door slammed shut. Now I walk the endless corridor. Doors stretch forever in both directions. I hear things behind them, voices calling, hands scratching, something pounding to be let out. I don't know where this place ends. I don't know if it ends. But I know this, Saint Mercy hasn't finished with me. And if you ever hear laughter in an abandoned hospital, don't follow it. Because the hospital doesn't let go. It never lets go. The visions didn't stop. Every hallway showed me more. Doctors cutting into patients who screamed and thrashed, only for their voices to be swallowed by silence. Nurses whispering lullabies as they held pillows over children's faces. The walls bleeding, the floors pulsing as though alive. And through it all, my grandfather. Watching me. Following me. Sometimes hanging from the rope. Sometimes standing at the end of the corridor. Sometimes whispering in my ear. You can't leave. None of us can leave. Finally, the hospital brought me back to the children's ward. The chains across the doors were broken now, hanging loose. The double doors creaked open, inviting me inside. And I stepped through. Inside, rows of small beds stretched into the dark. Each bed was occupied. Shapes under sheets. Small, still forms. The children stood around them, their glowing eyes fixed on me. One stepped forward. A girl, her hair in tangled braids. Her smile too wide. He stayed with us, she whispered. Now you will too. The sheets on the beds shifted. Small hands reached out, pale and skeletal, grasping at the air. The children's voices rose in unison. Stay with us. Stay with us. Stay with us. The floor trembled beneath my feet. The walls shuddered, cracking open, bleeding black. The hospital groaned like a living beast. And I knew then what had happened to my grandfather. He hadn't hanged himself out of despair. The hospital had claimed him. Consumed him. And it wanted me next.